There's a countdown. All right, I think we are live now on Riverside instead of using Google Hangouts. This is a trial first run of this. We've done some demoing in the background, but there may be some hiccups on this call. So this is just the preface to all of that as we are experimenting with the Riverside and using this as our platform to potentially engage more people than we would just have on a calendar invite. In the Wharf Telegram channel, there's a pinned message that has the public join link, which lets you kind of jump in live on the audience. We are also streaming, I think, live on YouTube right now. I should probably check that. Sweet. And the chat. We have a chat now as well that you can kind of join in. Oh, we got a couple people in the chat. That's cool. Let me check on YouTube real quick. It does look like it is live. It'll be nice because it'll automatically publish there as well after the call has completed. So I guess without further ado, after we can get started. And afterwards, if there's any feedback on how this actually went, feel free to share it. So cool. With that out of the way, this is the 16th call now. For the Wharf project. It's going to be a small break after this week's call. Next week, there will be no call. And the week after that, it is highly likely that there won't be a call either. Me being kind of the one that facilitates this between our team and the public, I'm going to be moving. So that's going to eat up a lot of time. I got a long drive and lots of boxes to move. It's a good time. I'm just going to unmute myself as I switch to this. What was that?
I said, I hope you have a good move. I know how stressful that can be.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think it'll be good. We've planned about as much as we can for it, and still trying to figure out, where to squeeze in all the development work in between that chaos. So things will be just a little bumpy over the next couple weeks for me personally. The team's going to continue on. They've all got kind of pretty set directions. We'll go over that here probably in a little bit. But I think to kind of kick things off with updates, we have an 0.4 that is coming out. The session kit is already published. So if you're using the session kit and you update to 0.4, you're going to have to update the wallet plugins specifically. The reason we incremented the minor release number in this weird state is because it does have one breaking change for the wallet plugins. So as you're upgrading, make sure all the wallet plugins are on the 0.4 and the session kit is on the 0.4. And the web renderer itself, this pull request is still open, but we expect to get it out probably in the next 24 hours or so. I thought about pulling the trigger on it already, but it's one of those things where it's like you could always fit one more thing into that release, and we just need to find the proper time to cut it off. So lots of UI updates coming in this that we've been talking over the last couple weeks. The user interface, I'll kind of dive into it here in a little bit. I can show you kind of the changes. It's still not final. I don't think it's ever going to be final because we keep getting more and more feedback about this would be cool, or bug reports about specific elements that don't work properly. But there's been a lot of progress made, and we want to bundle this up and get it out to people who are A, using it, and B, kind of keeping up, reviewing, and providing feedback. So this will be published here soon. All of this is on NPM already. So if you do an install or an update for all of the WharfKit packages you're using, you'll start getting 0.4 releases. And if you run into bugs, please open GitHub issues for them. We have been trying to react as quickly as we can on all of that and make sure that it's compatible with all these various applications. So I guess to go into some of that, if we go to the session kit, there haven't been a ton of changes to the session kit, which is awesome. it looks like I actually forgot to push the tag. The major things just being some quality of life stuff. We have light and dark mode for logos now, and we also have logos for blockchains and for wallets. That's in the session kit as a definition, but actually lives in the UI renderer itself because that's going to be the only place they are used. It's like aware of which chains you're using, and then you can extend that to add additional chains. Like if you're a developer out there using Antelope to build your own custom blockchain, like you can define that stuff in your configuration, your like instantiation of the session kit, and then like the UI will be informed, the wallet plugins will be informed, and it just like it'll relay that outwards from the core of the session kit. We've done some fixes to the logout stuff. I know there were a few issues where like not all sessions were getting erased, so there have been some changes to that. There's a new restore all method, which will actually iterate through every session that exists in the storage interface and then restore them all. So that way they are all usable sessions all at the same time. It's created some pretty cool use cases that we think people will be able to really take advantage of with IBC. Like if they were logged in with an EOS account and a Telos account, the old model of restore, you had to go restore them all one by one. And then you could, say account A transfer and account B do something else. And both of those could relay to their appropriate signers. And this restore all method just does that for you. It's a helper that iterates and restores all the sessions into your application, wherever you decide to put them, your state management, and then be able to actively use them.
You mentioned before, Aaron, that the way I was iterating over, get sessions and then just restoring each session by passing the session object, you said that might have caused an issue or could potentially have something. I just wanted to know, now that you implemented restore all, is there any problem with the way I was doing it?
I don't think there is. Whichever session gets restored last in that, like the loop you were doing, that would just be the default session that would be restored on page load. I think that might be the only weirdness, if you were.
But that doesn't affect anything if I, choose which session I want to transact with every time.
Correct. The restore session by default just sets what the last used session was. And then if you only use restore, it'll pull that last used session and restore that one only. And so it's just, if you're going to do that and you're going to use restore all or looping and iterating and restoring them by hand, if you're expecting on page load to get them all, like you'll have to build kind of that yourself. So that would be the only weirdness. It's kind of like a gotcha. You can easily resolve the issue. It's just something you'll have to be aware of. I didn't find anything else wrong with being able to restore multiple sessions. So I know they think that's where we last left off. Kind of diving in, just as a notice, this used to be called the Web UI renderer, and now it is just the web renderer. It's going to be published under this name on GitHub now. So if you have a dependency that's set up to use the web-UI-renderer, that dependency will need to be removed, and then a new dependency will need to be added. We're doing this to simplify the name a little bit and follow along the same path that the console renderer was using as well. So we think we have most of the localization in place now. This PR, like I mentioned, will get merged. I have a copy of it running here. You can see the interface itself has gotten some updates. We still are missing some of the graphics that we want to add in. Wallets are starting to get logos now. All of the plugins will just need to be updated to include their logos. Like I think the Cloud Wallet's the only one that really in this list needs to be updated. All the independent UI elements are now starting to get styles. I'm in dark mode right now. I think how do you do that? Light. switch emulate light theme. So now it basically inverts the colors. There's going to be a better barrier. If you've seen our design, we're going to have some splashes of color between the header and the body. But essentially, it's going to respect whatever the user's browser is in terms of light and dark mode. Every element in the kit supports this. And it's just a way for, us to embrace that whole paradigm that operating systems are now starting to embrace. All of the elements themselves, as you're switching between a lot of these, now have animations. I don't know if they show up well on the stream, but just some like little subtle nods to it. All the blockchains now have logos. These logos are not finalized. We grabbed what we had and put them up, but like you can see the little trademark logo there. We need to do a little bit of cleanup on some of this stuff to differentiate them. There is a new GitHub repo that we'll probably try to get people to help us with. It's called Chain Logo. It's in the WharfKit repository, and it is literally just all of the icons. We want to try to collect nice icons here to use within all of WharfKit. And then we'll pull them in. And right now we're hosting the images themselves out on our CDN, which is through Cloudflare. So we'll take care of uploading them and maintaining them for the time being. But they can be altered through the configuration. So the configuration itself, I guess just to touch on that real quick, you can either, when you're defining a configuration for a chain, you can either use a URL for the image, which is what we're doing right here, or you can use a base64 encoded image like you would in an embedded CSS or something. That is how we're doing it here. Sorry, I'm trying to open the developers tool again. There we go.
For the network selection, that's based on what the application provides, right? Like they can lock it to one
network selection. Is that what you said?
Yeah, for the network selection.
Yes. Yep. And if there is only one network, it skips it.
Exactly. When initializing your session, you specify all the blockchains you want to support. And if you put just one, it won't ask. But if you put many, for the chains themselves, and you're using Anchor, then Anchor will prompt you, choose a chain, then choose an account to log in.
Right. That was really what I was asking, if it would show you still the selector if you only had one. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this. The whole thing is designed fairly intelligently as to where it will only prompt you when it needs something. That's kind of one of the design goals with this. Like when you pick Kleos, it's like, okay, what blockchain? And then when you pick which blockchain, it says the account name, because it knows that it needs to ask you about the blockchain and the account name, because the wallet can't dictate that. But if we go back and we just pick Anchor, we skip all of that, because Anchor and the protocol it uses, this QR code has the blockchains that the application has requested embedded in it. And Anchor will return the account name to the UI kit or the web renderer when it responds. So like Anchor doesn't need that stuff, but when you log into Kleos or like the private key signer, it knows to ask you about this stuff. So these are all settings that the actual wallet plugins themselves can define. And even going one step further, like the Cloud Wallet only works for Wax right now. So in the Cloud Wallet plugin, it has a setting that says, I only work on this blockchain. So when you click Cloud Wallet, it just triggers the Cloud Wallet, which I don't think you can see on the stream because it's a different window. It's in a pop-up, but it did pop up with the Cloud Wallet login window that they support. So yeah, the whole system itself should be smart enough to do that. And if it's not, and you notice that there's some step that shouldn't be being performed that is being performed, that's a bug. So feel free to let us know.
I notice sometimes it's doing like a pop-up and it says like doing some things, or like it's a quick message, like almost like a status message. Have you seen, like, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I think so. Where it said something about doing cool things. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, we changed the words on that one in this next release. But that pops up when there has been no status provided by anything. If you notice a situation where that does pop up, let us know, because we can like reach into that plugin or whatever process is happening and actually make that status more informative.
And can we hide it? Like if, for example, there is no actionable action on that pop-up, can we just not show it, for example, because we might be using our own progress, our waiting animation for the user to transact or whatever else you might be doing?
We do have an issue open for that right now. I think I slated it for this release series. Maybe it's not in here. Web renderer status. The disable of status prompting. This is the one where we're going to make it so that if it's not actually prompting for something, that it doesn't say anything. It's just that window is closed. You can add a loading icon to your application, or do whatever kind of fun progress stuff you may want to do in your application. So issue number 5, if you want to track that.
Perfect.
I do. What was that?
Perfect. I will.
Cool. And then one other last thing on the UI is that we're adding support for light and dark mode for all of the iconography and all of the logos. So you can see like we have the black and white, or the, is it black? No, it's actually blue. It's the white background with the blue anchor logo on there. And then if I switch to light mode, you can see it's now the blue logo with the white thing. So we're trying to give plugin developers, specifically wallet plugin developers and specific blockchains, some pretty strong options in terms of branding. And a lot of that was because like our logo looked absolutely terrible on a dark background being blue. That's why we were like, we need to switch this up.
The thing is that I think in dark mode, you don't want to necessarily have the title bar white, because the white in a completely kind of dark site is like too jarring.
It's very much in your face. The designs themselves do have some more color that'll eat into the white, but maybe we can even address it being white altogether. Maybe it could be a off-white or some other color. We have a lot
like
of
I suggested,
designs.
I think at some point in the past, it would be amazing if, like, I know you use like like primary colors and naming in your CSS variables, but it would be great like if you can specify that as part of the render UI, or like when you're adding the UI, new web renderer UI, in your session kit. It would be great if you can at least override these, like specify the same variable name and just like override it, and that can, like, I don't know, add like another CSS file that's like overriding in the iframe.
Yeah, we should be able to do something like that. Maybe it's even like some JSON you pass into the constructor of the UI or something that lets you override them. Just using, like, if you tried to just add CSS to the head of your project, like you're gonna have a hard time styling because of the shadow root that exists here. But if in your app we can give something like that, I will say, I think
or maybe even pass on a CSS file, like like either we define the variables or we pass on a CSS file that gets appended to whatever CSS is being loaded by the shadow root.
Yeah, that would actually
allow people easy customization and not have to disable it everywhere because it just doesn't match that particular gap.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, not only could you pass like the actual values, but you could just pass a file name perhaps, and then it would just inject that file into the shadow root.
Yeah.
Cool. I will definitely note that down. I was going to say, theming was not one of our like line items in our milestones. So I don't know. We haven't evaluated how long that would take, but if it's an easy win, maybe we will try to add that in. I'll at least open an issue to track that.
Perfect, thanks.
So I'm going to just use a private key signer. We'll log in with somebody that's going to get errors. All of the UI theming is also part of all of the prompts that appear now when you're transacting. Again, all light mode, dark mode. There's still lots of subtle optimizations we want to make. Last week we talked about better error handling. There's been issues open for that, which we hope to be able to hook in, so that way, when you see this, like, this doesn't make any sense to a user. Hopefully they won't see it due to the other plugins, but when errors do occur, we hopefully will have a system where you can either define your own or like include some sort of package that can make them more understandable to humans as opposed to developers. Like I said, all of the interfaces, those are the buttons now that have been changed over, same error flow. The autocorrect plugin, which is kind of the fee prompt, this one automatically detected this account didn't have enough net, just like we described earlier. It also doesn't have enough CPU. So in this layout, or in this network being on Jungle, it would take that much tokens to do the power up. It fails on this account. I think we've gone over that in the past. It's just because of the way the permission structure on these accounts is set up. But in a actual application, the automatic correction of resource issues will be one of the plugins hopefully most people will use. So things like fuel, where this is the fuel or any other resource provider plugin where you're going to use a third party. Same, again, prompts and fees. We still have a little, we need to narrow up the text a little bit. All of this is now mobile friendly. Well, that's not mobile. If we go to full scale, all the windows will now work in mobile. They all stick to the top of the screen. You'll notice there's no more jumping around at all. So if we go to a really long one, it'll fit whatever, it's being touchy. It'll fit whatever the display is, let you scroll on your mobile device. Hopefully will be very mobile friendly, no matter how long the actual displays are, and provide a fairly nice interface for when you're in mobile browsers. I think I don't really have much else to kind of show on the mobile front or on the design front. It's been a ton of bug fixes. A big thank you to everybody that's been reporting things. We know we still have quite a few issues that still need to be resolved. We took the most prominent issues and got those fixed up. But there's a lot of little minor tweaks. I mean, you've heard me talk about a few of the UI ones throughout this. That's where the UI and the session kit are at. That 0.4 release, again, will be out within the next, probably sometime today, but definitely within the next 24 hours. In terms of other stuff that's going on, the website is, if you go poke around the branches on the website repo in the WharfKit organization, you'll see progress happening there. And in the background, we are really starting to dive into the contract kit right now, which is the milestone that is due in June. It's a big project, so we're getting a head start on it. And for those of you that just think that Wharf is this UI thing, the contract kit is the next kit out of 3 that we're doing. And if you think about the session kit as the one that is session management, it's in your application, it's the user interface, it's the boilerplate for interacting. The contract kit is for you as a developer to make developing on this platform easier. It's focused on reading data and writing data. The writing data is going to be, you're going to be able to define contracts or have contracts automatically generated based on ABIs and based on other data that can be extracted from APIs. And it's going to, within your editor, let you see that contract. It'll have IntelliSense, support for your IDE. So that way it'll have autocomplete about which actions are in that contract and what their parameters are. No longer Are you just going to like write transact with a manually crafted action object and then be like, oh yeah, what's the data that goes in this transaction? And then making sure that the way that you enter the data is in the same order as the ABI, so that way it doesn't throw an error. Like all of those kind of gotchas in doing client development that we expect everybody to learn and know how to do is going to be reduced through the contract kit. You'll be able to say you want a new contract kit and it is for EOSIO.token. And then you have an instantiated contract that then you can call the methods of that contract on. And that's kind of the right side of it. When those transactions are performed, they're passed into the session kit. And that then it'll relay it to the user's wallet, they'll sign it, and just like everything we see today. And then
so in essence, it would work kind of like how you would have like the Web3, connecting to Ethereum. You can do like new, wallet.eth.contract, give an ABI and address, and then you're able to just, call this contract.methods, take any, read anything from it and kind of work with it as an object of source.
Yeah, that very much is similar to the goal of the contract kit. So nice. It'll, like when you have the EOSIO token contract loaded up again, for example, like you'll be able to, I think it's .call right now. And then when you call .call, it'll know that transfer or open or close or any of those smart contract actions are available for you to call. And like your IDE can suggest those things. You'll be able to like look through them and see what they call. And then when you pick one, it'll know what parameters it needs. So that way you can then fill out those parameters and more easily like actually use those smart contracts in your application.
And you need the .call obviously to API or take a cache off it or whatever.
Yeah. We're still kind of going back and forth on like when the ABI is loaded. But there will also be code generation commands that you can use to pre-generate all of that stuff. So that way you don't even need to call get ABI in the client. Like you could actually have the ABI embedded in your application. So that way it knows what those are. And then if you go that route, it's obviously an optimization. But if you update your contract, then you have to update your front end code. So that is one of the trade-offs.
Well, you can always like try to also store the hash of the ABI or something, and try to like detect. Well, you still won't be able to detect without fetching it again, but
yeah. But at least you could call get contract hash or whatever, get code hash.
Yeah, get code hash. It's far later.
Yeah. So we'll be able to call that and maybe invalidate something. There's an open issue in the session kit for that as well, because the session kit has an ABI cache. And I went down that rabbit hole looking at get code hash and was like, oh, this could be like, we could store the ABIs in local storage. And then whenever you call an action, maybe or periodically we're calling get code hash to make sure that the cached ABI in local storage actually matches on chain. And if it doesn't, then we do the call and update the cache. So definitely ways to optimize the call patterns of performing transactions and writing data to the chain.
Can't recall off the top of my head. What happens if you try to write a contract? If you try to send a transaction to a contract with an old ABI, will it just fail? Or will it continue if that part of the ABI is still fine?
I honestly
think you don't even need an ABI transactions manually, as long as you're aware of the structure. I think the ABI is more like the helper to understand how to serialize everything. And
exactly. Well, I'm guessing it would only matter for a specific action which was updated. Maybe there's like a binary extension parameter added or something like that.
Yeah. I think for the most it won't affect, like assuming that the code itself didn't change or didn't change. Even if you change the ABI, like I don't see like how that would change, like manually.
Yeah. The ABI is just like you said, Jack. It's instructions on how to encode and decode.
Mike indicator moving, but I don't hear anything.
Oh, we heard him.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
So Aaron can't hear me right now. I can say anything I want.
Sucks for you.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
All right. Go back on mute.
That's weird. Well, we found a bug.
Or is it a feature?
Maybe.
Aaron,
Nice. Well, if somebody wants to play telephone or put it in chat or something, because like I don't know what's going on. It does say, like, I did get a warning that you had it open in multiple windows, and that may be causing an issue. I'm not entirely sure. Learning this new system should be fun. Continuing on the contract kit, the other side of the contract kit is reading data. Like everything we've talked about is like writing data as a developer, how you perform actions, how it makes your IDE better. And just really helps, form the actual transactions that will flow through the session kit. The other part of it is reading data, specifically from like tables and whatever future structures we have. Most of you are probably painfully aware of like the syntax required right now to retrieve data. It's kind of a pain. I never remember exactly what the field names are. You have to specify that like 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 lines of JSON, like individual fields, in order to be able to query a table accurately. And it's difficult to use. So the other side of the contract table or the contract kit is being able to figure out those what those parameters are and automatically set them, and really abstract away the get table rows call from the developer. It's obviously always going to be available if you want to use it, but the contract kit will have other methods, like we were talking about call a little bit ago. This other method might be get table or something. So on the contract, you'd be able to call get table, and then you specify a table name. And maybe you can pass a scope as well if you want, but turn it more into an ORM or kind of a query language. So that way you can more easily access that without specifying that crazy JSON blob. It'll also have the same kind of, what was that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it'll also have functionality like an iterator within it. So that way, instead of like, oh, is there a more flag and what is the value, or a more parameter and what is the value of the more parameter, and then having to do recursive function calls to get more data. Like when you have a cursor or an iterator of a table, you'll just be able to call more, and it will know how to assemble the query to load more data. That is always, how often do you see people in developers chat that say, I asked for 100 records and it gave me 40? And then the solution is, well, you need to recursively call get table rows. And then all of us, I'm sure, have had to implement this where it's like, okay, time to refactor the call to that table so that way it always loads 100 records. The reading part of the contract kit aims to kind of solve that, do some of that automatically, and make it a little...
I think if you're going to do that automatically, it's going to be important to add that this was paginated, because then you don't guarantee that state was actually the state at any block, right? Because by the time you paginate, that first page could have changed, that second page could have changed. So at least, it will have to say something in the results that, this is like from the second pagination or a time. Something like that. The user knows that this is not necessarily the state, or like all these rows don't necessarily exist at the same time.
That's true. And I think in that situation, we'll definitely have to have something that indicates to the developer that this happened, and there should be a way to turn it off as well if you do need an atomic look at, like, here's a get table call, it returned X number of results, but it was all within one block time frame.
Yeah, something where you specify, say, like the rows you want to get, and then like a variable that's like do not paginate or something.
Yeah, exactly. And by default, maybe it doesn't do this. maybe it does just return a cursor, and then it is up to you on how you want to handle the cursor. Because even in our current world right now, if you are recursively calling get table rows to build a set of data to display to a user, it's not all going to be within one block, most likely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good way. Like you want to use something like, like a history solution, or there's different ways to extract the state of really large tables. But, obviously like Diffuse offers that, where you can get, like, using their state DB, you have a snapshot clearly at every block where you can get like the state of any table. And there's other ways to do it, like you can extract it from any snapshot or something. But
a lot of the applications are also going to need that.
Go ahead.
A lot of these applications are also going to need that cursor so they can store it on their side to know when to, let's say, lazy load at the end of the scroll down to get the next page.
Yeah. There's going to be...
Yeah, that's a good point. So you might want to have like almost like you can, like have something where it's like, I want these more rows, and then like, like the result.paginate or something when you want to like get the next, say, batch.
It's the last place that I was.
Exactly like that, like a virtual scrolling table.
Yeah. And to start with, like the contract kit is going to abstract the get table rows calls to access data like that. But further milestones in this actually do involve making it so that that layer of abstraction can be used on top of other APIs. We have milestones, or like parts of milestones that involve Hyperion, atomic assets, all these other more popular things that exist out in the ecosystem, and being able to then access both state and history and other types of data relevant to whatever you're doing through some sort of plugin architecture. That's also why we're starting on it now, and it's still not due for a couple months essentially. So contract kit is
if you're gonna abstract get table, I assume there's still gonna be a way to do like specify key type and index position and all these fun things if you want to really craft a specific table get call.
Yeah. And
do you actually mean that in the same way that you're going to use the compile time contracts kit to generate an object which has all of the contract methods, you're also going to generate a method for getting tables specifically named by the table, like a contract dot get? Okay, cool, very cool.
Yeah, the code gen portion of it is very much going to be both for the reading and the writing side of things. And it'll only be obviously what we can, know about your contract. But I imagine there'll be some cool build steps that people might be able to come up with for, like, oh, I finished my contract, now automatically update my front end sort of thing. Opportunities for continuous integration. Don't know what those look like yet, but they'll be there.
This is coming out tomorrow, right?
Oh yeah. No, we have kind of prototypes. If you want to see some of the, like a really rudimentary version of the code generation, I guess we have ABI to core. This was kind of like an early prototype of what this could be from an ABI caching perspective. And it uses Kleos right now, but if you run like this command, it's going to get the ABI for the EOS.io token, and then it's going to pipe it through ABI to core, and it generates structs that mimic the ABI that then core, which is, the core library of the session kit and of the contract kit, is going to be able to ingest these and just know what the ABI is, both for actions, for data types, for tables, for everything that's defined in there. So this is not what the contract kit will be, but it's kind of a precursor to it that led into this train of thought about, okay, how can we really deeply integrate your smart contract code with your front end to make it less of a nightmare on the client and to have to constantly get ABIs.
I think it's very much similar to existing workflows in other ecosystems for blockchain development. What we've had in EOS.io historically and now in Antelope is kind of anti-pattern to blockchain development.
Yeah, and it's so rough or Spartan, or like it's just so it's so verbose. Maybe that's a very neutral word to use for it. We expect you to do all of these
So
things
flexible.
and know all of these things. Yeah. And none of that's going away, just to be clear, with the contract kit. Like, the contract kit is a completely optional part of application development. And if you still want to manually craft all your API calls, like, that's what EOS.io Core or EOS.js or something like that's going to be available to use for. But for new developers, like, that barrier to entry is just so high right now that we need something a little bit more abstract and maybe automated a little bit to ease that entry into the ecosystem. So yeah, all of that to say that that is what the team is working on. I'm not involved in that yet. They are running with it, brainstorming, working on some really rough code for it, figuring out how we convert that kind of data into both JavaScript and TypeScript, depending on whichever environment's going on. How do we pass the sessions around? How do we pass the transactions around? Like, what all those design patterns are right now is kind of what's happening in the background with the contract kit. Team's about half split right now, with half of us kind of working on the session kit side with the web renderer and like trying to button this up into a great user experience. And then the other half's starting to really like think deeply about this and starting to write prototype code and unit tests and things like that. So that'll be a couple months out, but in the meantime, we will hopefully have the session kit in a really stable position in the not too distant future. Multiple languages, clean UI. I know UI work always takes longer than you expect it to, because web browsers, you guys have done stuff on the internet before. But yeah, I mean, in terms of updates, that's pretty much all I have today. Again, next week, this call is definitely not happening. And the week after, there's probably like a 90% chance that it won't be happening because I'm moving. So yeah, was there anything you guys wanted to cover today? Any questions, any concerns, anything like that? Floor is kind of open. I'm just now kind of looking back at chat.
I think it's a great update.
Thanks. This question about any plans on smart reload by Decentralized. I'm kind of reading it over again. I'm not sure I'm following. Is this about table data or the web application itself, or? Not sure. They're still around.
I think this question has more to do with how you're going to use Wharf. Like, I don't think it's Wharf, right? Like, when you want to reload things. Like, I think it's more like, when a user logs out, when do you reload the data? When do you cache it? But I don't know. Like, I feel it's not really.
It also feels like it, and Aaron probably can't hear me still, but it also feels like it's more history solutions, right? So observing when actions happen and knowing that means you should reload a particular table, right? It's a good idea.
I couldn't hear you, by the way.
Like, maybe he means like, when you have to update get info, or when you have to, like, but it's really specific to whatever DApp he's using, right? So like, normally on like a DApp, you're going to update get info, like, like the user's tokens when he's done something on your DApp, and have a way for him to manually, refresh the data, just because obviously he could do an external transfer that you won't know about, subscribe to some history solution for every user, which is not generally practical.
Yeah. And I think there's a milestone for exploring some of the streaming data from various things. And that'll probably be within the contract kit or an extension of the contract kit. But I don't have details on that quite yet.
And currently, Wharf doesn't do any like get account info. I think EOS Transit used to do that at the time. Every time you log in, it calls get account info and kind of like embeds that into like a dot account like key within the wallet object. But I think you don't do that because I was like I think it's super fast once I log into like 4 accounts and I don't see any calls to any additional data outside what is being retrieved from the wallet.
That correct currently. I mean, there's a couple different ways that could be done. That could be done with after login plugin, which is still something that's coming, is the login plugins. And the other thing is coming after the contract kit is the account kit, which is basically a pre-built package using the contract kit applied against the system contracts that will then be distributed. And the account kit itself is for reading and writing account data. And again, it'll be code generated from the contract kit, which is why it's coming after the contract kit. But then when you have a session from the session kit and the user has logged in, there will be an embedded account kit object within the session that you can then call .account on that session, and it will access the account. So you'll be able to get to that data. It probably won't happen automatically unless you make it happen automatically.
Oh, yeah, I was mentioning it as like an advantage. I prefer things don't happen automatically as much as possible to control, how much data I want to like call and do, and maybe I'm caching some of it myself, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I very much agree. I mean, years ago when we started working on EOS.io Core as an alternative to EOS.js, it was because EOS.js was doing so much that we didn't want it to do, and we couldn't modify that flow at all. So that was kind of, that principle was almost the birth of this years ago, was like, we really need that power to be able to dictate what's happening. Like I didn't want it to ever call get required keys every time you performed a transaction. It's like, we don't need that to happen, but somebody had the opinion that should happen. So it always happened, and it still does, probably thousands of times a second across all of the APIs in the ecosystem because of that decision so long ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, preaching to the choir here.
Reconverted.
Cool. We've got some decent progress on documentation, I guess, as well. Hopefully we'll be able to start sharing little bits and pieces of that in the coming weeks. Ultimately, it's going to end up on the website, the WharfKit.com website, but right now it's all just going to live in GitHub as we start hammering out content to include there. We might do another preview article or another kind of how-to article just as a tutorial. These are some of the things that I'll be able to more easily do as my life is in chaos, is still write content and just share knowledge. So hopefully we'll have something like that soon to engage with people once again. Hopefully this opening this call up will open the floor to more people being able to join in and like be a little bit more interactive. I know we haven't really used the call-in function, I think they call it, but definitely something to do in the future.
Especially once developers actually start using it to replace their existing depreciated solutions.
Yep. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue this after the actual project is completed and there's no more. I mean, there will still be updates, but there won't be as much progress anymore. And then this call could morph into, almost like one of those Twitch streams you see where it's live developers coding. And, you can jump into their chat and talk about what's going on and ask questions and stuff like that. This could turn into something like that, where it's like, okay, let's take React Native today and integrate Wharf into it and make it so you can log in and perform token transfers. And then it's just like an hour of that with people participating and joining in. Or maybe it's like an open roundtable type thing where it's like, what problems are you guys having with front end development? And it's just a open floor to talk about solutions and problems and that kind of stuff.
I think a combination actually might work quite well.
Yeah.
Like having something where, on a weekly or, every 2 weeks or whatever time frame, you have some type of tutorial that tackles like, oh, here today we're going to build with Vue a simple, thing with Wharf, or today we're going to use React and do this, or, Flutter or whatever it may be. And then at the last 10 minutes of the call, you take any questions regarding that or anything else to do with Wharf.
Yeah.
Or whoever is hosting it. That would also just from a marketing standpoint and for developers and stuff would be, I think, could be quite impactful.
Yeah, I very much agree. And hopefully this platform that we're using now, Riverside, will help facilitate that. Because like if somebody did the request to join from the audience and then they were brought on, like they have screen sharing capabilities, they could share things, they could show the code itself and, talk over it live on a platform like this. So cool potential. I know we have some weirdness going on, like I can't hear Jesse, but we'll figure that out.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, we've got maybe, oh, wow. We've got 2 minutes until we hit up against the hour. Was there any last thoughts, any questions, anything specifically we want to talk about?
Let's get back to work.
Works for me. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for being guinea pigs today and testing this out. It seems like it went fairly well. And if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out and feel free to join in these calls. They're normally weekly at this time. So, and we'll be streaming them live to YouTube. I can't talk now. And we're going to see how that goes as well. Hopefully we'll be able to just publish this immediately afterwards and make it available for anybody in the future that wants to watch it. So thanks for joining, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.